Well, good afternoon, everyone, or for those who are joining us virtually, good evening or good morning. Really looking forward to this conversation. I think aptly described in the screen behind us as kind of building resilient, adaptive, and disaster-ready communities. Because while we know kind of climate change is making kind of more people more vulnerable everywhere, it is making particularly people who live in disaster zones especially vulnerable. And so really grateful for the conversation today, beginning with my longtime friend Abby and my new friend Rajiv to hear kind of the institutional responses from Oxfam and Visa, and then looking forward to hearing from a terrific young activist and opening up the conversation more broadly. And so maybe Abby, we'll start with you. Kind of why is this kind of particular area of focus so important for Oxfam? Why did you decide that in the whole kind of sweep of work that Oxfam could be engaging in as relates to climate adaptation, mitigation, kind of response, resilience, why this area?
Yeah, thanks so much, Chelsea. And it's a wonderful opportunity to be here with our partnership and with Visa, because we all know, and I think being here at COP, we know that the frequency and ferocity of climate-related disasters is increasing exponentially. We're seeing that just in the last 4 years, the number of people who need humanitarian need be due to climate-induced disasters has increased fourfold. And it's just, the numbers are staggering. 350 million people in need of humanitarian response and support. And we also know historically that anticipatory action, disaster risk reduction, preparedness is the best way to save lives and to do it economically. And so we have this opportunity now, and based on learnings, and to bring together a whole suite of interventions that we've gotten to test and prove and see that work, starting in the Philippines. In 2014, 2019, we had an opportunity to test how we can get cash to communities who will need it most before a disaster strikes, using parametric data and our skills and experience, and those who might be unbanked or need to have access to resources that enable them to either protect their livelihoods and their own assets, to make decisions that empower them to move elsewhere if they know, and have the data that's localized in real time so that they can do better and prepare better for disaster when it strikes.
And I think, Abby, that's such an important it's such an important point around sort of the pre-deployment of capital to help people kind of protect their lives, protect their livelihoods. It's an important intervention, though, not only for individuals and individual families, but also for communities and at kind of a population level and a public health level. And I certainly want to make that point because we're here, on the inaugural kind of COP and Health Day, that this is absolutely about kind of community resilience. It's also about community health and well-being. And Rajiv, Abby spoke about kind of how important kind of the not only kind of cash transfers, but really kind of financial inclusion and financial well-being pieces are to this work, because hopefully it's not only that kind of point in time transfer, it's also kind of helping kind of build skills and awareness that themselves are part of kind of family and community resiliency. Can you talk about kind of why this is important to Visa, kind of about your partnership, kind of, to this point, and where do you see this going forward?
Absolutely. And again, thanks for doing this. And we're really excited about working with Oxfam on this. So we're used to public sector partnerships. So we have been working with governments on many different programs. Think pandemic, making contactless happen in those times very quickly. We work with governments on asylum seeker benefits, unemployment benefits, a whole bunch of social programs that we've been doing for many years. So working with public sector is not new to us, but this idea of anticipatory aid came through Oxfam, and we did some work in Philippines over the last few years. And the idea was to scale that up as this challenge is becoming more and more real. And I think one of the points which Abby told us was that every $3 of anticipatory aid saves about $7 for the governments and people who receive them if it was done after they went. So there is the economic side of it which we kind of relate to as well. And we think a lot of what we do from a technology perspective and digital payouts can be used for this particular use case. Of course, the recipient is different, the challenges are different, but we thought we could help bring some of our own experience of doing it in other scenarios into humanitarian aid. And we're very thankful for Abby and her team to give us a chance to do it. So the program will start in 4 countries, and we'll talk a bit more during the discussion. But it's really, really exciting. We think we can use digital payments to make the whole experience of cash transfers better, make it quicker and more efficient. And the point you made around inclusion, that's one thing we care about a lot. We do think people get better economically when they participate in digital economy, and this could be a stepping stone into that too, while that may not be the most obvious linkage.
Rajiv, you spoke about kind of Visa's longstanding, partnerships with the public sector, kind of, rapidly scaling contactless payments during COVID, helping asylum seekers and kind of people who are part of kind of the social safety net more broadly access kind of benefits they're entitled to kind of more efficiently, more equitably, more reliably. And yet, as I was listening to you, I was struck by how few other kind of financial institutions of your size, scope, scale, and kind of global presence have the same kind of level of commitment. I do want to go back to the pilot kind of program and kind of more about kind of what you've learned in the Philippines and elsewhere. But before we do that, I'm just curious how you're thinking about hopefully trying to bring other people along with you so that work like this can be in more places with even more partners kind of more quickly.
Yeah. I think one thing which is good about Visa is, apart from us being a global company in kind of 200 countries, our business model is one of a network, which means we work with most of the banks around the world. We work with most people who accept payments around the world, which pretty means a large part of businesses work with Visa in one form or another. So when we do things at scale, a lot of those partners come along on the journey naturally. So if we enable, for example, anticipatory aid in Philippines, we'll work with a lot of local banks and partners. So by our very nature of the business, we bring other people on board, and we are able to take that messaging into a wider sort of ecosystem purely because of the business model we have, and that we feel very privileged about.
I wonder, Abby, before we kind of turn to talking about the Philippines experience and then hopefully having you kind of talk about kind of the pilot, kind of, again, why was Visa the right partner for you? And then Melchior, we'll turn to you. But Abby, first, please.
Well, our commitment and their commitment to financial inclusion and using data and joining forces with Oxfam in looking at the research and experience we have in anticipatory action, disaster risk reduction, and knowing that cash in advance of a crisis, make sure that those who need it most, it's most proximal, and can do the work that is needed. We are deeply committed to what we say is local humanitarian leadership. We know that those who are at the front lines where disaster strikes are those who are responding immediately when it happens. And when they have the predictive data, tools, resources, they can be empowered to make the choices they need. So we've had the experience, and we tested and piloted very intentionally and carefully, because these are people's lives. And we don't want to take things to scale if they are not going to work, or even if we can learn, and of course, above all, make sure we can maximize the impact. And so in 2019, we had the opportunity to partner. We look at the public-private partnership relationships, and the opportunity presented itself, and we were able to learn and prepare and look at what could be done. And so now we do have the opportunity to take it further in the Philippines, but also, as you mentioned, to 3 other contexts in Kenya, Colombia, Puerto Rico, and we look forward to also seeing if we can apply it to places with other hazards and economic contexts, such as Lebanon.
Fantastic. Melchior, thank you so much for being with us. I hope that you can hear us, and I hope that we certainly can hear you, because I think we're quite eager to listen and to learn from kind of your experience in the Philippines and kind of why it was so important to be part of kind of the Be Ready campaign, kind of what you think we should know, and what are your kind of hopes kind of for this program going forward.
Thank you, Dr. Clinton. That is right. The Verity model actually was being piloted in the municipality of Salcedo. And the Philippines, unfortunately, is now the most disaster-prone country in the world as of 2022 World Index, and also the epicenter of the climate crisis. Being in the typhoon belt of the Pacific Ocean, we annually experience an average of 20 typhoons. My province, Eastern Samar, is located along the eastern seaboard and is one of the provinces usually hit by typhoons in the Philippines. Our municipality, when I was still the mayor, is of course also located along the seaboard. We are a fifth class or a low-income municipality that is home to 23,000 individuals or around 5,000 households. And experiencing Super Typhoon Haiyan in 2013, when I was first termer municipal mayor, I really had zero knowledge on disaster risk reduction and emergency response. I have to deal not only with devastations caused by the super typhoon, but losing everything, the lives, the livelihoods, houses, public infrastructure, and many more. Its horrific experience pushed me to look for solutions that can allow me and my municipal Disaster Risk Reduction and Management Council to mitigate and reduce disaster risk. When I learned about the Building Resilient, Adaptive, and Disaster-Ready Communities project of Oxfam, when it was first introduced to me in 2019, I was already convinced that it is the strategic pathway for our municipality to be resilient. And why did I say that it is the strategic way towards resilience? Because it uses a state-of-the-art parametric forecasting model to advance and improve our early warning system that is linked to a set of parameters to help us to anticipate disaster impacts and guide us to prepare ahead. And this early warning system is linked to a digital financial system and allowed the program release on a real-time the cash grants before the landfall of typhoon. Using this digital account, and I afford Visa prepaid cards locally available and accredited to our small community stores, our constituents that are living in most vulnerable or at-risk areas usually receives a fund to safely evacuate, stockpile food, medicines, and water, strengthen their houses for strong winds, harvest their crops, or evacuate livestock or fishing boats. While we have the national government issued a weather forecast, especially for tropical storms, it gives us little window to prepare as the forecast is issued close to a typhoon landfall. Unlike Verity project or unlike Verity, it gave me advanced forecast information even when the typhoon is still developing and allowed to take action in advance. When I saw how Verity model can help my municipality despite legal or policy challenges as we have no law on anticipatory action yet, as the Chief Executive, I work with our DRR office and municipal legislative body to adopt a policy to allow us, a local government, to use the model and technology of the Verity. Now I'm serving at the provincial, I should say, provincial government as a legislator, and I chaired the Disaster Risk Reduction and Management as well as Climate Change Adaptation, and I have advocated to adopt the Verity model to help better prepare our province and also help local government officials practice an effective disaster risk reduction governance. And right now, what I am doing actually is influencing other local government units to also adopt the Verity model towards province-wide, not only province-wide, hopefully, but also towards Philippine DRR resilience.
Attorney Melchior, thank you so much for being with us and for sharing your experience. And it's really now my honor to turn to Marinal, who I was lucky enough to be with at CGI not that long ago. One of our just extraordinary climate activists, really on a worldwide basis, whose experience and kind of calling to this work came from her own kind of lived experience, kind of through the kind of super typhoons in the Philippines, which we heard from Attorney Melchior, are more common than anywhere else on planet Earth. And so I wonder, Marinal, if you could share kind of thoughts and reflections about kind of the Be Ready program, and what else you think that we should know that we haven't mentioned yet or spoken to, and kind of anything else particularly that you'd like our panelists to offer thoughts on.
Okay. Hi, Attorney Melchor. Attorney Melchor was actually our mayor when Super Typhoon Haiyan happened, and we have seen his leadership in recovery and up until now, actually. So I have my notes here with me, and thank you so much, Chelsea, again, for opening this space and for recognition. For others who don't know me, I'm Marinal Obaldo from the Philippines. I'm a climate activist. I'm part of the advisory board member of Global Witness and board member of Climate Tracker. I'm a survivor, just like Attorney Mergal of Super Typhoon Haiyan, which was the strongest typhoon ever recorded in human history. I witnessed with my very own eyes how loss and damage is a reality in our communities, and how people struggle to survive one disaster from another. I do remember that when Super Typhoon Haiyan happened, we were all back to zero, and then there was another typhoon that came 2 weeks or 3 weeks after. So we have been rebuilding a lot, and we are very fortunate that my small village near the Pacific Ocean is one of the covered areas of the Be Ready when it started in 2019 in Eastern Samar, Philippines. And I'm very, very glad to be here speaking because I personally experienced how the Be Ready program transformed our community. It has empowered at-risk and climate-impacted communities by bridging them to the forefront of the solution. By integrating science-based data and experiential learning of our community members on the triggers used as part of the early warning system, we are better informed on disaster risk and how to cope with the next disaster. And I think that's what we are trying to really advocate for, is not just for the communities to be just the beneficiaries, but be the partner and a stakeholder of programs, so that our communities has the ownership to the program. So even if Oxfam and Visa is not there anymore, we can still survive on our own, and we can implement that with the help of our government. So one of the key challenges when a disaster hits is that people are not financially ready for it. So in the Philippines, we're in a day-to-day survival. So we don't even have we don't even have that thinking of saving, because we are literally just thinking about what's the meal for the next meal. And especially when low income and isolated areas, meaning they don't have the means to stock up food, medicine, and other emergency kits before a disaster or when a typhoon makes landfall or when a flash flood inundates our village. However, Be Ready has bridged this gap, and not just facilitating or capacitating and empowering the communities, but also gearing us up for a better disaster preparedness, which has truly become a game changer in our own community and other communities as well. So my question for Attorney Melchor Mergal is, how can we lobby with the government to make this approach sustainable? Because under your leadership, the local government adopted a policy to sustain Be Ready. So how can we make this a government institutional mandate, so communities are not only disaster ready, but builds up their resilience? And for Ms. Abby, In my personal observation, communities are left hanging when a project or partnership ends. So what are the plans of Oxfam, including your organizational priorities to support climate risk communities, to invest greater in anticipatory action and disaster preparedness so communities at large benefit from this partnership? And for you, Rajiv, I appreciate how Visa is taking leadership to include climate goals in your corporate priorities. My question is, can your company or Visa mobilize other private sectors to be part of the consortium of partners to invest, continue, and further advance community empowerment and disaster preparedness using your platform, technology, and resources? Thank you so much for this opportunity to share this question. I hope your organization and institution will continue to take the lead, and thank you so much for supporting our communities.
Right now, thank you. Thank you so much. And Attorney Melchor, I think we should start with you, and we'll go in the order in which she asked her questions. So how will you and mobilizing young activists, including Marinelle, and maybe those not so young activists as well, kind of put pressure on the government in the Philippines so that kind of Be Ready can be a national program and not only kind of in the provinces in which it is currently being deployed or planned to be deployed?
Thank you, Marinelle, for that question. Actually, whenever I am presenting the Verity project all over the Philippines and even outside the Philippines, this is always the usual question because we have policy barriers. We do not have yet laws regarding anticipatory action in the Philippines, although they are saying that in our DRR law, there is this part of anticipatory action. However, it is not actually being, it's not enhanced, it's not highlighted. So what I'm doing right now is I think we have to continue to revisit our DRR and CCE laws and policies to, of course, enhance or highlight anticipatory action. Also, I think we have to involve concerned agencies in our impact reviews. Right now, we are lobbying before lawmakers, our legislators, and other, of course, policy-making bodies to help us strengthen our advocacy so that we can influence not just the legislators, but the agencies that are responsible for disaster risk reduction and climate change. And recently, we have been engaging with Oxfam with their advocacies in creating platforms to create awareness such as convergence and encouraging the private sector coordination to produce evidence that really anticipatory action is key towards resilience and empowerment. And I think right now what I am hearing at the top level and even the municipal mayors as well as the governors, they are actually, it's a welcome development for them, engaging anticipatory action when it comes to anticipating disasters or climate change impacts.
Thank you so much, Attorney Melchor. And Abby, questions around really how do you ensure that communities are centered kind of as this work moves forward?
Yeah, excuse me. It's a great question. It's a fundamental one because when we have approaches that work, we want them to be sustainable and to be able to recreate themselves and last and expand. And so this opportunity, this partnership really brings the opportunity to expand the approach in the Philippines. 4 countries reaching up to 1.1 million people who are vulnerable to disaster, and also looking at other economic crises and vulnerabilities such as in Lebanon. And so we see this as an opportunity to extend it, but not for us necessarily to perpetuate it ourselves, but we know that approaches that work can influence local, national and global action. And so at the local level, we hear the wonderful local humanitarian leader that is with us right here, Attorney Melchor, and all that he has done to look at how to expand this in the Philippines, in his municipality, but looking how it can go further. When we look at global as well, being here at COP28, and we talk about some of these big mechanisms such as loss and damage. And that is fundamental. We can celebrate that there is now some investment in it. It needs to go to scale. But we also don't want that to be the only mechanism for response. We hope and we will continue to use our voice and advocate for resources that are allocated in loss and damage to anticipatory action. Again, we know that it saves lives, it saves money, it saves people's livelihoods, it saves people's dignity, it empowers people. And so this approach, and I've been in this sector for a long time, and we have the data, we know what works, and this is an opportunity to have a suite of interventions together that looks at the intersections of humanitarian crises, the increasing frequency and ferocity of climate-induced disasters and inequality. And we know that these crises, the climate-induced disasters, hit those who are least responsible, and furthest from where they can access resources, and it hits them the most. It's disproportional, it's unequal, and we need to reverse that. So we want to make sure that the humanitarian and climate architecture also has mechanisms that understands the value of approaches like these. And with the public and private partnership with Visa, there's such an opportunity to encourage a good new practice into the ecosystem of not just aid, but anticipatory action, disaster preparedness, and responding to what we know there's predicted to be 560 major climate disasters by a year by 2030. That's more than, it's like 1.5 every day around the world, affecting millions of people's lives. We know that there's a risk of an increased number of people affected and in need. And if we can do this and really set new practices and approaches that work at local level, at national level, and at the global mechanisms, and with our partnership with Visa, that can look for more sustainable solutions over time.
Thank you, Abby. And Rajiv, I think the question for you is not only kind of other companies in the financial sector, but in the private sector more broadly, because I think one of the things that kind of unites all of us by definition and being in this kind of room together today is that we know we need multi-stakeholder partnerships to be able to kind of innovate and ideate, but also scale. And so how do you kind of think about kind of answering Marinelle's question of how do kind of you and we kind of bring more private sector partners, whether in financial services or elsewhere, kind of into this specific kind of anticipatory capital work?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. And we all know that public-private partnerships can really add a lot of value, but they're not very easy to develop. I mean, and Abby will know, we've been working for some time now, and our language is different. Like, our day-to-day goals are different. And the best partnerships are where the partnerships sit in more the commercial side of the business and the do-good side of corporates, because that's how it becomes more sustainable, and that's what we've tried to do. And it's been hard on our side too, but you do need champions in the companies who can do it. And there are more and more employees who care about it. So don't think of companies as one amorphous thing. And these people are sticking their neck out and taking these partnerships and making them work. So part one of your answer is the more we do such partnerships and talk about them, it gives other case studies to point to and see how it is done. I think that's a big deal. And the second one, which I was telling Chelsea earlier, is just Visa being in a unique position as a network. That we work with lots of companies who either accept payments or issue cards and things like that. They come on board in more and more countries where we launch these programs. So they just end up joining it through a partnership of execution, and they might have their own interest later. So that's the other way we can help, for sure.
Yeah, I wonder, Abby, Rajiv, if you could share how you picked the kind of other 3 countries that you're going to, although spaces and places, because Puerto Rico is, of course, part of the United States, but kind of how you picked kind of where you're deploying and what you hope to learn kind of in those experiences.
Yeah. Go for it.
Well, we have a global network. As Oxfam, we work in over 80 countries around the world, and there's a diverse set of needs and livelihoods and vulnerabilities in climate-induced disasters. And I think we're all aware that there's a range of livelihoods. There's coastal communities, such as in the Philippines. There's pastoral and agro-pastoral communities whose ancestral livelihoods are being decimated. There's those who are in other settings where there's economic crises and other hazards that they're facing and conflict hazards. And so we wanted to make sure there's a range to be able to take this mechanism, because we know that cash transfers are best practice at this point. It empowers communities at the local level. And we worked closely with, there's a lot of interest across our network.
I see your limit on that.
In our network to do this. So limiting to only 4 is something we're hoping and really excited to be able to take what we've learned and proved and demonstrated as an approach that works in the Philippines and expand across different contexts and crises and vulnerabilities. And we hope that that would give more incentive and demonstrate best practice across different types of shocks and hazards, but always putting local communities at the center, working with local municipalities so that those practices can really be instilled and can influence the national level policies as well.
Rajiv, please.
This is where the partnership helps, because Abby's team knows more about the humanitarian sector and where the challenges are more and where the help is needed. So that information came from them. From our side, we look at it more from a programmatic perspective. So if you see the 4 countries, they're in 4 different continents. So they offer you 4 archetypes to scale with. So that's how we think in terms of scaling programs. And the second thing is we do look at our own infrastructure and see where we can get things done first, so that we can model it in those countries and take it to others. So it was kind of a interactive thing where we had information from Abby's team on which countries need more help and likely to have more of these climatic events. We layered in more around how will you scale it up. So why don't we pick 4 different markets so that we get enough different archetypes, and also we'll look where the infrastructure would be easier to set up first. So.
And also kind of then the credibility to then build further because of the different kind of climate shocks and experiences and archetypes and kind of population density and exposure to climate risks and.
So in fact, Abby's team was a bit shocked. The language was we're investing in a startup. So we're looking at very startup investment kind of a discussion is like we first prove it in 4 markets. So the language from us was more around. But that's what you need to kind of get to scale, is to make sure you're very robust in setting up the program well in the first set of countries. Yeah.
Abby, did you have something else?
Well,
I see you not nodding emphatically.
Yes, the language, we continue to learn a lot, and that also, I think, will be good for all as we go and advance the partnership and deepen it and strengthen it, as the question implies, across diverse continents and contexts. But we also, it's not just working, obviously, at the local community level with those who are first to respond, and that includes small businesses. And that is also an important aspect of how this program and partnership aims to work, because everybody needs to be looking at how to do the preparedness, how to help communities prepare, protect themselves against shocks that they know are happening, and then being able to make choices about, depending on the scale of the typhoon or the disaster, sometimes they might need to just to remove their assets and resources and move to safety. But even that requires local level community work with small businesses, with community members, and also the access to resources and being able to get that technology that helps disperse those payments in advance, but not too far at the right time, using the parametric data. So there's a whole lot of opportunity here.
Well, and I think, here as we are on the kind of Climate Health Day, And there's such a kind of intensity around kind of the innovations that we need and what we don't yet know. But I also think we need to be mindful of what we do know. And so, Abby, when you were talking about how we know that cash transfers work, we don't need kind of to study this again. We know there's efficacy. What we really need to know is how best to take what we know work to help provide that protective effect, at the right juncture, kind of for communities that are vulnerable, whether, to typhoons or to mudslides, to fires, to other natural disasters that are being made more frequent and more ferocious because of climate change. And I think that's also a really important point. We need to, in this moment of urgency, have the kind of confidence for what we know works, the curiosity for what we know we need to know that we don't yet know or understand, but also kind of the humility to be in partnerships with people who know more than we do about how to take what we know works kind of into communities in a really durable way.
Absolutely. I mean, I'd love to comment on that even further. And, other things we know, we learn, we know what best practice is. Women and youth and how they are engaged in preparedness and response and how they are disproportionately affected by climate disaster. So this is a mechanism that can get the resources into the hands of the very people who are usually left out of the larger macro ecosystem. Women-led organizations, refugee-led organizations. We're hoping that being able to test and pilot this in different contexts give us the ability to really push and change the age architecture as well, and how approaches like this can work and influence the sector.
You preempted my next question, which is around kind of how your partnership is really kind of centering women and girls, because we know if we don't center kind of gender and women and girls, we are only going to remain kind of more marginalized. But you answered that. I know we don't have much time left, but I didn't know if there were any questions kind of for people here, or Attorney Melchior, if you wanted to kind of share more. I want to give kind of anyone who's in this space with us, but whether virtually or kind of in a chair here with us today, if anyone has any kind of thoughts or reflections or questions about this topic, to please raise your hand. Yes, great.
Hi, thank you all so much. My name is Haley Kiesling, and I'm a student at Indiana University in the States. And I'm studying smart city technologies, and so this project is really interesting for me. So I'm wondering if you foresee any implementation with this project, with such as sensors or other aspects of IoT, such as like wastewater management systems. I don't know how that kicks into your data system that feeds the early warning systems, or even after disasters happen, maybe putting some of that funding towards improving sensors and other technology that can help prevent further damage in the city, so helping that adaptation and mitigation. I know you're not necessarily focused exactly on cities at the moment, but do you see that growing in the future?
I don't see why not. That's not in the current design, because we also want to make sure we execute really well in the first four countries. But the intent always was and still is that whatever we build together is the infrastructure for everybody else to use. So other humanitarian aid organizations or anybody else who could use that forecasting, for example, or the digital payout infrastructure can use it. So it's not just Oxfam's own disbursements, for example. If anybody else wants to do it, the same infrastructure can kick in. So your point is very valid, but it is a public good, so to speak, for others to use.
Abby, do you have any?
It's really a yes and, but it's an excellent point, because as Oxfam, we work in the area of water, sanitation, and hygiene quite a bit. Sometimes in some contexts, we work with partners or municipalities to strengthen wastewater management and other water infrastructure, potable, non-potable water. So again, I think that's sort of a future orientation of what we can build on and learn from this particular mechanism, and if we can influence, say, loss and damage, to include a different type of anticipatory or preparedness type of investment when we know what the risks are and we know that what the good preventative investments could look like. So really, that's just food for thought to energize and inspire our thinking. Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you so much. This was such a fabulous panel. I wanted to highlight Marinella. It was awesome. I I wanted to ask about. I know you'd mentioned 3 countries and 1 territory, but expanding it to like regions. I've done some study in my job on like the Arctic and the Antarctic, and I think about like regions that don't really have like a clear government. Where you maybe have multiple governments or a treaty with different actors there, but not really governing. So just curious if you thought about expanding it to regions like that. Thank you.
So we are a global.
Can you use a visa on the North or South Pole is also now what I'm curious about. For all of our heroic scientists, who live, I think, in quite extraordinary, to try to not use a value-laden word, extraordinary conditions, working in the Arctic or the Antarctic. Do they have Visa cards? And then I want you to answer the question, but I just now feel like we need to know that as well. And if not, Rajiv, what are your plans to expand Visa?
I have no idea. This is a good question for you to answer, but we do use a global lens to think. So we are in 200 countries and our payments work everywhere. So we do obsess over that a lot, and the fact that there's a lot of operational resiliency. We use this term called 5 nines, which is our uptime is 99.999%, right? The cybersecurity, all of that, there's a lot of background work which goes into running a global system. So it works everywhere. I can't answer the South Pole question, but there's a lot of stuff which goes behind the scenes which makes this whole infrastructure work.
Yeah, so I guess to give a bit of more context, I work in the cruising industry and I do ESG, and I know that like with especially in the Arctic there is more human activity and there's a lot of indigenous people that need help and need finance. So I don't know if that helps, but and also conversely with like Chile and Argentina and like research scientists in Antarctica. So I do think human activity is expanding down there. Maybe not yet, but something to keep like your mind there.
Other questions or thoughts? And if not, Attorney Melchior, I didn't know if you had any final kind of closing thoughts to share, and then we'll turn it over to Abby and Rajiv again.
Yes, thank you, Dr. Clinton. Actually, I am very thankful with the partners, the private sector or international organizations that are having this kind of presence in the Philippines. Actually, the disaster risk reduction and climate change adaptation are actually responsibility of the government. And coming from the government perspective, it is our mandate to support the creation of an enabling environment to allow life-saving, relief, recovery, resiliency building, and development efforts be sustainable. And for me, this can be done through, number one, collaboration with the different stakeholders, such as the private sector, the businesses, the civil society organizations, and humanitarian and development agencies that will work together and support local organizations to access the international aid, special disaster and climate financing for the most vulnerable and at-risk population of the communities. Next is to support the institutionalization of initiatives like BERID through the adoption of local policies and resolutions to sustain anticipatory action measures and disaster climate financing for genuine change and long-lasting impact. Then government to become a collaboration and learning platform to encourage and facilitate complementation of programs from different agencies, and focus on most vulnerable and at-risk population of the communities, especially allowing women to be an active participant in policy and program designing and decision making. And last but not the least, is to educate also our own ranks in the government to support scaling of programs like BERID from community to national, regional, and global. The successful pilot of BERID and its proof of concept is evidence that when different stakeholders work together side by side, even the strongest typhoon cannot break the will and spirit to continue developing our capacities to combat climate change.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Attorney Melchior. And Abby and Rajiv, any final closing thoughts?
Oh yeah, well, here to the last comments, and you know we're all here at COP, and this is a time for bold action. We need to look at a just energy transition for the countries who are least responsible for the climate-induced disasters. So we're hoping for big, bold action on just energy transition from fossil fuels to support in a just way local and least developed countries. And we also need to look at this combination of climate finance and humanitarian finance and not see them as separate things, because right now some of the ecosystem of financing is really nonsensical. It's kind of established and it gets sclerotic, and we know how to invest better, but sometimes the resources are not flowing the way that we need them to. And so this really represents an incredible opportunity, I think, for us to take the proof of concept and take it to scale, reach the first 1.1 million people, and hopefully, as both the need for the humanitarian need and the people who are displaced by climate disasters, hopefully will be reducing over time, and we can be part of that solution.
Rajiv?
Yeah, no, just quick. Public-private partnerships can really help solve some of our biggest challenges. Climate is one of them. And I hope we provide a case study for others to use. And two, while it's not the stated aim of the program, we do believe as Visa that for small businesses to participate in the new digital economies, they need to be enabled for it. And even programs like this, where you use digital methods to pay out aid or cash payouts becoming digital, enables that ecosystem and makes it more sustainable once people become part of a more digital economy.
Great. Well, thank you all so much for this really vibrant and important conversation. Rajiv, you're going to share back whether or not Visa is accepted in the world of Santa Claus in the North Pole and the scientists in the South Pole. But really, I think we're all so eager and excited to kind of learn what you learn in your first 4 sites, kind of enfranchising 1.1 million people, and hopefully then using that as a springboard to bring these interventions to more people in more places, to really prove why anticipatory aid and the form of cash transfers is such an important part of every aspect of helping communities build adaptation, resiliency, and so much more. So thank you for sharing the Be Ready program. Thank you for being with us today. Attorney Melchior, thank you for joining us virtually. Ronald, thank you always for kind of lending your voice and your expertise. And thank you all for being with us. Thank you.
Thank you.